What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Appreciate your support. Today we're going to jump into Return to Karazhan Upper, and I'm going to go ahead and walk you tanks out there through a foolproof route that will certainly help you guys start tanking higher keys. So as you can see, we're going to take it slow on this first one. There's no need to go balls to the walls and go ahead and bring both of these upstairs. A couple reasons for that. This spirit right here is going to put a dot on the tank that's just absolutely nasty. So on fortified weeks, you're going to want to make sure that you take care of those mobs before you go ahead and get into your Zolgamox pull. So as you can see, I've also got the video sped up just for the sake of really kind of speeding up this route process. Upper is a longer dungeon, and I don't want to put you guys through a half-hour clear. So we go ahead and do our Zolgamox pull, and Zolgamox is the seasonal affix, or part of the seasonal affix, and therefore scales by key level and not tyrannical or fortified, so just keep that in mind. So with these Zolgamox pulls, you always just want to make sure you're taking care of the bat, scare beast, stun, whatever you can do to kind of interrupt that cast so that a party member doesn't get MC'd. Stay out of the purple swirls, and it'll be GG against Zolgamox. So we're going to go ahead, finish up our pull here, make sure that bat is CC'd, and we'll go ahead and move on to the next room. So you got a couple of options here. If you got a warlocking group, you can go ahead and warlock gate right alongside the middle of the red carpet here. We go ahead and shroud since we've got our rogue with us, and we go into the next pull. Now some people like to pull trash onto the abstract nullifier here. I choose not to, mainly because I'm going to be double pulling into this room, so I just want to go ahead and make sure that we've got this guy down. And then the other reason for it is that it is spiteful and necrotic weak, so I just didn't want to have both of those two things to have to worry about, and have the rest of the party have to be chased off by spitefuls with the nullifier still up. So I'm going to go ahead and wait for Curator to patrol away here, and I'm going to go into my first double pull. I'm going to LOS it and make sure that I've got everything ready to go ahead and get everything grouped and hold aggro so that my team can kind of open up on these ads. Biggest thing you can do here is interrupt as a tank. You can go ahead and stun as well, except for the elementals. Other than that, the elementals will slap you around a little bit, especially on those fortified weeks, so something to be mindful of. As you can see, I made an attempt to go ahead and clear my necrotic stacks. Didn't end up working. That's okay. I only had those two mobs on me at the end, and so it really kind of stopped stacking and everything was under control. I go into my next double pull here, and I'm opting to wait for Curator. I don't want anything real goofy to happen. I don't want to get smacked out of nowhere and not have a heal in range, so I decided to play it safe. Curator does end up resetting, and you'll see I'll accidentally get Curator with the shield bounce on this double pull, so Curator is going to be coming. Once he goes through this door, he will reset. So if you get him, not the end of the world, but again, because I'm out there by myself, I didn't have my healer with me, I just opted to play it safe. So we're going to go ahead and just kind of rinse and repeat exactly what we did in the last pull. My necrotic is getting a little bit higher here than it was in the last pull, so I do go ahead and dwarf that off. And as a friendly reminder, you can use the dwarf ability, both Dark Iron as well as the regular dwarf and File, to go ahead and get rid of the necrotic affix. Makes life 1,000 times easier as a tank. Additionally, if you're someone who really struggles with necrotic and kiting, if you want to run the Clea Soulbind, it will give you 8 seconds of immunity against necrotic popping back up again. Worth mentioning, however, in Shadowlands Season 4, there are not too many dungeons that would require this, so just keep that in mind. You can safely run Meek Nikos in this dungeon. So we're going to go ahead and get into the Curator pull here, and a couple of things worth noting about this fight. The first of all is that this is really a fight over space, more so than anything. As you can see, the team keeps getting these blue puddles, and the main goal is for us to try to drop them in as focused of an area as possible to leave us with as much room as possible. This is a 21 Tyrannical key, therefore the boss is going to be up much longer than he would be on fortified weeks. The other thing that you saw me do there is move the boss forward right before he went into his evocation so that my melee could safely reach him without stepping into a puddle. So our goal here is to just kind of bait the puddles, stack if we can, but for the most part just kind of consolidate them in a given area so that we don't end up overwhelmed by puddles and we don't run out of real estate. We could be doing a better job than we are, we're a little bit too spread out, but we've got obviously the damage to go ahead and beat the check here. On groups where you have lower damage, you're going to want to make sure you're at least stacking up to bait those puddles, and then moving from the right to left side of the room, or just kind of making sure that your ranged are at least standing close enough to melee to the point where they're not taking up way too much space here. So you'll be able to beat the Curator on Tyrannical generally, if not during the second evocation, shortly thereafter, depending on your damage. And we're going to go ahead and get into our next room here. We're going to opt to skip this guy. He's kind of a pain in the butt, even though it is a Tyrannical week. On Fortified, he's really a pain in the butt, so I would advise skipping him entirely. However, this next mob has been severely nerfed, and he's solid percentage, so probably worth pulling. On Fortified weeks, he does hit a little bit harder, so instead of tanking him where I am in this video, I would recommend you just kind of pull him up into the tunnel. That way your entire group can get off the floor. You don't have to worry about too much movement. But given the fact that it is a Tyrannical week and that he doesn't have too much health and that we've got the DPS that we do, we opt to just kind of leave him where he is. But again, you can pull him right up into the tunnel leading up to Medivh if you'd like. So once he's down, you should be talking about your interrupt order. Interrupts are the one thing that will stop any group, whether it's organized or pug, from wiping. There's a weak order to kind of track all of his casts and make sure that interrupts are going out. You can see I'm using it. It makes the casts much bigger than they need to be if you're not already tracking them on your plates. I do recommend tracking them on plates though. So we've set our interrupt order and we have gone ahead and started the Medivh encounter. The biggest thing that you want to do is essentially make sure you're interrupting everything except for arcane missiles. The arcane missiles is something that the tank can certainly soak. However, on Tyrannical weeks, you should be mindful of how many stacks the tank has. If the tank stacks get way too high, it will absolutely obliterate your tank. So you're going to want to help out and occasionally interrupt the arcane missiles. As it goes into the Guardian images here, this is the most healing intensive part of the fight. You're going to want to do everything that you can to help out your healer. The biggest thing you can do is make sure you're interrupting these mobs. So again, that interrupt order is super important. I would recommend putting the melee on the first bird with the ranged on the second bird, and that way that you should be completely covered on really the first bird's entire interrupt cycle, and then half of the second bird's entire interrupt cycle based on your damage. So then we go right back into Medivh. His main three abilities that he does, you saw the first one, which is the Guardian image with the birds coming out. The second one is this ice floor here. All you have to do is jump or move for that matter, and you can avoid this entirely. And then the last one is Flame Wraith, which is going to trap at least 2 players in a circle of fire. Should anyone move who's in that circle, it will indeed wipe the entire team. So just keep that in mind. Our Flame Wraith is coming out now. We've got our 2 people surrounded by fire, and we are 100% still as a team. We're not taking any chances. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up Medivh here, and then we're going to go into the never-ending falling cycle. So it's at this point that we're talking about how we want to handle the next boss. There's really only 2 mobs between Medivh and the next boss. And generally, we're comfortable on Fortified weeks pulling a couple of mobs, mainly the Dreadlords, onto the next boss. And so that's ultimately what we're talking about right now, is how we want to end up pulling and whether or not we're going to be pulling onto the next boss. We opt not to do so, but not because we don't have the damage. It's actually because our mage has a soulbind for Night Fae that causes a slow fall on top of that slow fall to happen. So in a way, he's kind of trolling us a little bit with his soulbind, but obviously he's running what the best bind is for his class, so you just have to work around that. So we're going to give him a minute here to kind of catch up. He's still actually in the process of falling, believe it or not, and he'll be catching up now. And then we go ahead and we'll pull this last Dreadlord as we wait for him to make his way over to us. You can see him kind of coming up in the back by the books. And once he's by us, we're going to go ahead and move into the next boss, which is the Mana Worm boss. Okay, we've got everyone there. And we're going to try to ultimately pull this boss into the corner. It's something that a lot of groups have been doing, and it's been a pretty good way to absorb orbs overall in this fight. Ultimately, it wasn't working for us, so we end up bailing about halfway through. But the biggest thing to know as a tank is that you want to soak as many of the orbs as possible, and you want to make sure that you are clearing your stacks so that you're not absolutely getting walloped on top of the rest of your group. So we do our best to kind of absorb what we can. And after doing this for about 2 cycles in this position, we realized that for whatever reason, we're not getting the orb absorbs the way that we thought, and our stacks are not nearly as high as they should be. So you'll notice that we start to pull the boss out. When you do get the stacks, all you have to do is go stand in that purple circle, and it'll slowly shrink down as you clear your stacks. And you can watch the debuff on your nameplates. But it's okay to carry 1 to 2 of these, just kind of depending on how comfortable your healer is with the fight and the healing requirements for it. Again, with this being Tyrannical, we decided not to take any chances. Our healer was already just kind of going outside his mind on this one, so we just wanted to make this a little bit easier. So right now we're just kind of discussing, alright, this isn't working, we're going to go ahead and move him. Now everybody needs to soak because the Mana Worm's mana was just way too high. So you'll see the entire team start to soak now. And then given our damage, we make pretty quick work of him. You can see I had a couple of stacks, I just cleared them in the pool as the pool shrank down. And then again, we're being very, very careful to make sure that none of those orbs get through at this point, given how hard everyone is getting hit by each one of those pulses. Okay, so for this next portion, quite a few groups will end up just skipping everything in here. We are not, and it's mainly because we're going to be skipping the entire bridge section. I'll talk a little bit about that here more in a second, but we go to the right because it's less count than going to the left. You can jump down the middle if you want, just kind of depending on your route and your pathing, but if you do this route, you can jump down the middle and pull the pack that we're going to pull next first, and then 1 pack of these worms instead of just double pulling, and you'll be able to have the count that you need. You only need to be at 90% here before you advance to the chess event. So it's worth noting that 90% is the magic number here. There's a multiple ways you can do it. You can skip this entire room if you want to and just do this 3-pack. But the reason we go to the right is because it is a Tyrannical week, and therefore the trash is pretty darn easy. So we just decide, instead of being cautious, we'll just go right through it, just in case the worst happens and we end up wiping somewhere along the lines. So during that trash pack, we actually had our rogue go and hit this next pack of 2, one of which contains a Dreadlord, and he popped them into his Dreadlord form. This allows us to invis as a team right by the Dreadlord without the true sight. So if you have anyone with either Shadow Meld, the Feigned Death, or the ability to vanish, you can send them to pop out that mob and turn them into a Dreadlord so that your entire team can either invisibility using their belts or an invisibility potion, and you can just completely avoid that bridge altogether. There's a lot of deaths that happen there, seeing pugs fall apart there. It's just generally not a fun place to be. So we're going to go ahead and start the chess event now. I'm doing my best to stay always proximity based, the closest to the king, to make sure that my rogue doesn't end up getting slapped, while simultaneously helping with whatever knight or chess piece we're looking to damage down as a team. We do a pretty good job of phasing this pretty quickly. We have to go through, I believe it's 2 different knights, and then the king falls below 1,000,000 health, and we're able to just continue to damage him down all the way through completion. You can see our rogue kind of got caught up running out of that ground effect. He actually wasn't meleeed, he just got clipped. But we're just leaving him down because we just don't need his DPS to finish this off. You're going to have to keep an eye on what the rest of the chess pieces are doing throughout this. You don't want to take some kind of silly damage. If you are a warrior, a protection warrior, you're going to be able to spell reflect a lot of what the king does, which is always a really nice thing to do and very unique to warrior as well. We're going to go ahead and make our way now to the final boss. You can see we're plenty good on time. And I had mentioned before that the reason that we clear the mana worms leading up into this area is just in case the worst ends up happening. And I've actually cut the video. We had a scuffed pull on this first one where we went down very, very early and had to reset. It's a long walk back, but luckily with this route we had plenty of time. Everyone's invis potions were back up, so we were able to recover and still get this timed. But instead of showing you guys the failed attempt, I'll show you how to actually do this boss. As you can see, I do get trained down here as a tank. It's really annoying when that happens. Yes, it can happen. Some people are surprised. But getting that beam is really a pain in the butt because the boss doesn't really like to move a whole lot despite interrupting it. Now the boss will do quite a bit of frontals. That's his channeled effect, his disintegrate. And then he also has a cast that needs to be interrupt. Now we're going to go ahead and phase and get onto the ship. And hopefully your camera angle doesn't get screwed up like mine did. But we're in a race now to kind of beat the beam. I fell behind, so I waited a little bit, and then we decided to leave the boss right here so that it gave us the entire platform to work with for all of the cleanses. It will essentially be on your healer to dictate when the cleanses need to go out, and then people need to be very clear or use an add-on like Bigwigs to announce to the group that they have the debuff on them so that they know that the orbs will be coming out upon cleanse. You don't have to be a healer to cleanse. If you are a dwarf or dark iron dwarf, you can dwarf off the ability with your racial, and that's something that I actually do here before I go through the portal. Now on this last platform, I pull it a little bit differently just because I'm a paladin and I have Divine Toll. We're trying not to interrupt the boss. We want him to keep channeling so that we can keep our uptime on the boss. So I'm staying away until my Divine Toll falls off, and then I bring the mobs right on over to the boss, and we'll get a last minute interrupt here. It makes the rest of the fight pretty trivial. So hopefully this is of help to all of you guys who are struggling with Upper Karazhan. Please let me know your thoughts and comments in the section below.